We are joined by Ugandan journalist in Wampama, Hakiim from the Next Media in Uganda. Good morning to you, Wampama. But just to get right into this, what can you tell us about this particular story?
Well, the story has been shrouded in a lot of controversy, and given the fact that this is one of those topics that are quite hot, you want to believe this as one of those topics that are quite unpopular or very popular, if you want to take it like that. But it is shrouded in a lot of controversy, and a lot of coverage hasn't been accorded to it. It can as well get a lot of coverage from international media. Otherwise, the local media is quite skeptical about coverage of such a story. Why? Because the editorial policies of most of the media houses in my home country, Uganda, are quite, you want to believe that they want to take the neutral stand. They don't want to stand as pro or against this particular law, and it is the same law that is still under contention by a couple of people, civil society activists, some journalists, and some people that belong to the LGBTQI community. So 3 petitions have already been presented to court, to the appellate court or the constitutional court, and these 3 had been filed by a couple of people. Constitutional appeal number 0114 of 2023, constitutional appeal number 14 of 2023. All these are appeals, and a couple of people, 18 of them, have appealed to court to at least interpret this. It includes some law dons from Makere and a couple of other people. So not much is known about that story, but much about that particular law. It is just a new law that has just been assented to by the president, much as it is still being challenged in the courts of law. And aggravated homosexuality comes as part of the Anti-Homosexuality Act that was passed by Parliament under a private member's bill by Asomani Basalirwa, Ebugiri municipality legislator, and it was passed by the president after having quite a lot of controversy. And the topic in and of itself in the Ugandan masses is quite, the bill or this particular act is quite popular because the country is highly homophobic. So you want to believe that members of parliament who are using their Bible scriptures and Quranic, verses to validate their passing of this law. The same law has already put the country at the verge or at a collision path with a couple of international organizations, including the Bretton Woods Institution, the World Bank, that has already threatened not to present any new funding request or loan requests from Uganda to its board, while also promising to review some of the existing projects that it has been, pursuing with Uganda. Thus include the USMID, they include the Kampala Metropolitan Area Urban Development Program, all of which are upwards of around $18 billion. So the country could certainly be facing quite a lot of international backlash. But back at home, men and women, mothers and fathers of this nation are quite happy with this law, never mind the fact that it imposes these harsh penalties to the people that could be caught culpable.
Now let's speak also into the death penalty. I mean, it's been years since that, since the death penalty has been exercised. And, for Uganda to go ahead, should this end up in the death penalty, what would that also just say about the country?
Away from just the fact that it speaks quite volumes about the nature of this crime or presumed crime, at least in the Ugandan context, let's speak about the death penalty in and of itself. My country has been grappling with this as not many death penalties have already been accorded. And according to the legislator, the mover of this particular bill before it actually became an act, he was saying that the death penalty is just a maximum sentence, and that they are assuming that there will always be this maximum sentence provided for by court is trying to, overstep the powers of court to exercise its discretionary role in choosing to give you either a life sentence or a death penalty as a maximum sentence. And that is one of the clarifications that were actually made to the president, because he had to send it back to Parliament to be reconsidered. So that is one of the things that the member or the bill mover himself said, that it is at the discretion of court to whether give you a maximum sentence or choose life imprisonment for you. So that is subject to court to be able to determine whether it gives you a death penalty or whether it sentences you to life as part of the overall making of the bill itself. But at a much more granular level, we should be able to discuss the death penalty in and of itself. The country, or the country Uganda and Africa as a continent, has always been, up in arms in terms of looking back at its moral fabric, looking back at some of the things that we advocate ourselves for as Africans. And a couple of people have actually been saying that members of parliament and some of the presidents that sit at the helm of the countries where LGBTQI communities are actually criminalized, that they want to substitute their motives or their personal feelings to things that are quite global, and trying to alienate them, their countries, from the global community, because the global community is known for having people that are quite liberal and people who mind about much of their business than mind about the business of two consenting adults who sit back in the privacy of their rooms and do what they do. So that is an ongoing discussion that we can always keep having. As to death penalty, that is to court to determine as to whether it gives you the maximum sentence or give you the death penalty.
Now, also what we know about this young man is only 20 years old, and of course he is the first to be charged in this manner. Will the courts of law, do you think the courts of law will be looking to make a stern example, send a strong message with this case?
I think if it does so right now, that would be quite phenomenal. That would be quite, not phenomenal, phenomenal is in quotes, that would be quite outstanding, because this is a law that is still under contention when it comes to some law dons at the University of Makerere, Dr. Businje Kabumba, Dr. Sylvia Tamale, among many others that are petitioning this, that this death penalty as part of the same law is null and void to the extent of its contravention to the Constitution, the 1995 Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land right here. So if this is done before court gets to determine as to whether the act in and of itself is lawful to the extent that it does not actually violate the Constitution, is something that would definitely be very, very subtle, or that would be something that will be treading a very tight path, because you want to look at providing a penalty to someone to die before it is actually, given a green light as to whether the law itself is constitutional. So that is something that we should be looking up for, and that is something that we should be able to report quite about as a country, and as to whether it should be expedited and provided for this judgment before the court gets to determine as to whether the act in and of itself is constitutional to the extent that it doesn't violate the Constitution. So we shall be looking up at that, and maybe the personal opinion, because we don't just become journalists at the end of the day. We live in this society. I would say that it would be detrimental to the jurisprudence of this country to have someone provided for a sentence prior the act that provides for that particular sentence is looked into to determine as to whether it is lawful to the extent that it doesn't violate the 1995 Constitution.
Now, let's also speak into that. The law also, if it does cater certain clauses as well, and I think it puts you as journalists in a very difficult position to not look like you are advocating, because that again could lead you into trouble. How you write the story as well could lead you into trouble. So how also are journalists, how have journalists received this new law? Because I'd like to believe it does put you in a very sticky situation.
Certainly it does, and that coupled with the editorial policies, because each media house is bound by its independent editorial policy, and now knowing that we work for the people that we work for are actually much pleased about this law, because like I told you, 9 in 10 people in Uganda are homophobic, and the remaining 1% will be the person who say, I don't care, because they simply hate the act. So you are working for a big global mass, or you're working for the masses that are highly homophobic. So you do not want to portray yourself in bad light as being one of the people that are for or that are against this bill. And when it was being passed in Parliament, a place that we report quite about in the newsroom, you find that whoever was perceived to be against this bill because they pandered or they were persuaded by logic was presumed to be someone that is either gay or homosexual in and of themselves. So it puts us in a very tight situation, and people that have been making arguments against this I've been making a report business, I've been making these economic arguments, and then people are like, no, you don't put your economics way ahead of our children. So while it was being passed, members of parliament were using Bible verses and Quran verses, surahs. They were using things such as pedophilia and pedophilia itself and rape. I mean, they were used interchangeably, and the law presumes that consent is not consent is in and of itself is not a defense. So it puts us in a very tight situation, in that even if you want to speak about logic, it doesn't count, or it doesn't cut it for many people in here. So whether you're speaking about the economic ramifications that are coming on the wheels of this particular act, you won't be making a lot of sense to many people. So it puts us in a very tight situation. And me speaking about this, I don't know about how my people will feel about it, but this is the job that I have to carry on. And knowing to it that I should be able to objectively report about this. I know the economic ramifications that follow it, so I must be able to speak to this. So I must be ambivalent to show you both sides of the coin, to tell you, hey, when we pass the law and incriminate just a few people and kill them, we would be doing a lot of disservice to ourselves, because we exist as a single bottom line as people. And before we get to these big newsrooms, we are people and we exist in society. Certainly not good for you to see someone die because of what they have chosen to do.
Yeah. Now, also, speaking of, just the economy, we did see recently also the World Bank announcing that, it will suspend or will be suspending new loans to Uganda as well. Do people care for that, or are they more concerned? I know you mentioned a little bit more into that, but, are they concerned about the economical factors as well that, pushing or rallying behind this law could have on Uganda, or is the concern more about cultural preservation?
Well, the concerns have been there, and one of the stories that I pitched the next day in my newsroom, following the World Bank's statement on passage of this particular law, was to just look at how much the World Bank has been subsidizing the people in Uganda. And to be honest, it is quite huge, and the economic ramifications are quite grave. I've spoken to the Lord Mayor of my city, that is filled with a number of potholes, not to say that it is one of the worst that I've seen in Africa, but he said we are navigating a very tightrope. People seem to actually care, and I've told quite a number of people, again, that before we discuss that live in this particular society, people do actually care, and the members of parliament have already come out to say, yes, we can live without the World Bank funding. But hey, look, members of parliament are some people that are a little, subsidized. They receive about 23 Uganda shillings. They have a car that is sometimes, fueled by parliament. They have these huge paychecks. Certainly, they do not get to feel the pinch of this. I mean, if they are passing within a pothole, the cars they purchase are quite big, so they have those big shock absorbers, so they cannot they are not the exact people that bear the brunt of this particular law. They take their children to private schools. They are not certainly the people that go to schools that are supported by the World Bank. People seem to actually care. Government has already said that it will carry out austerity measures to ensure we can cut our coat according to our cloth. But as to whether that is really feasible, I think that would definitely be substituting logic with common sense, which I don't think it actually beats it, because, again, popularity does not vindicate logic. It beats it instead.
Now, also, there's a lot of tension around the 20-year-old young man. But what do we also know about the 41-year-old man that is also involved in this case? Will he be facing the same charge as well?
The specifics of the law, if you get to read it cover by cover, you will get to know that the law assumes that aggravated homosexuality is committed by someone that causes a terminal illness to the person that they engage with. It should be someone in a fiduciary relationship. That is a relationship of trust between someone that has committed the act and the person that they have committed it on. And if you look at that certain age, that age disparity, if you're looking at 40 vis-a-vis 20, you get to assume that maybe, as per the standards of the law, that is still under contention. Certainly, you would be able to look at that some kids, are liable for that particular, penalty under the act. You also want to look, or maybe if further tests will be done on this 20-year-old and maybe realize they have gotten a terminal illness, maybe HIV or AIDS, then that will be aggravated homosexuality, and therefore it will be at the discretion of court as to whether to provide a maximum sentence or life imprisonment for them. So that is a matter of the law that can certainly be argued out in courts of law. But on the face of it all, even without getting more facts into it, as per the standards of the law, they definitely pass that bar.
Now, I want to just double back also to Justine Balya, who is the lawyer to the young man. Has she expressed any sentiments as well, into this case? And also, it must be very difficult to try and defend this case, again, looking back into what the law has to say.
I mean, I should say that the details of this particular story are to many newsrooms. You can speak about Next Media Services that I work for. You can speak about Nation Media Services that colleagues with whom we run around in the field. The details of this particular story is really into coverage from many Ugandan media household, and that I would be very, very honest to you. As to whether these people will receive justice in the face of the law that is still under contention, at least in constitutional court, is something that we can get to monitor. But to be honest, the details of the story are still scanty, and I don't think can receive that editorial green light to go and cover the same story. But we shall be keeping our eyes and ears on the ground, because again, we exist as a single bottom line. And again, before we do this journalism role, we as people, and we live in this particular society, we shall be getting details of this, and maybe we shall be updating our online audiences, and we shall be navigating that tightrope, because there is a very tightrope between doing a story about this law and being actually be one or actually receiving that backlash. So something that we can keep our eyes on, get to see what gets to happen.
Well, Wampama, thank you so much for giving us, insight into this story, and definitely we'll be keeping our eyes very close on this as you do give us details into this one. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.